work on fair compensation, which is what we call our living wage program. I work a lot with manufacturing, but I also support our agriculture team on living wage and living income topics. I also support the application and onboarding process of new member companies that join the FLA, particularly those based in Europe and Asia. And I also lead stakeholder engagement on living wages for the FLA here in Europe. On the next slide, we have quite a big team, big FLA team today. Before I get started with the agenda, I would like to give my colleagues the opportunity to introduce themselves. And maybe I can start with Steffi.
Yes, thanks a lot, Shema. Hi, everyone. My name is Steffi Ho. I'm the Social Compliance Project Manager here in the FLA, currently based in Portland, Oregon. So as my title goes, my responsibility goes to several projects and different projects plus the accreditation work. So currently I'm working together with the fair compensation team on the development of the dashboard and also the new wage collection tool 2.0 as well. And apart from that, I also work with the SCI team and also doing different data analysis. So very happy to be here today. Now I'll pass it to Rushu.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rushu Wang. I'm the Fair Compensation Member Engagement Senior Associate at FLA. I'm working with companies on their fair compensation plan using our dashboard, our wage data collection toolkits, and also similar to Shema, I'm also working with company, onboarding them who are interested in joining FLA. And I will hand it over to Carissa.
Hi everyone, my name is Carissa Guaman, and I'm the data associate for the social compliance team here at the FLA, and I also worked closely with the Fair Comp team as well. It's great to meet you all.
Thank you all. I think we can go to the next slide. Yes. So on today's agenda, I'm going to walk you through FLA's Fair Compensation Program and then our gender work plan. And then I will hand it over to my colleagues who will demo gender disaggregated wage data collection and gender pay analysis. And then we'll have some time for Q&A. And finally, we have some announcements on the tool and also on upcoming events we have over the next few months. We were looking forward to have a company representative with us today, but unfortunately, they couldn't be with us due to unforeseen circumstances. We still appreciate their engagement with us on this topic, and we have a lot of interesting content and information to walk you through today. Yes, next slide. So for those that don't know the Fair Labor Association, we are first and foremost a labor rights focused NGO. And we have global membership in two main industries in what we call the manufacturing program, which covers apparel, footwear, and accessories, and then agriculture and the food sector. That being said, the tools we're going to be talking about today largely apply to the manufacturing world, so really apparel, footwear, accessories. In the agriculture sector, they might apply to plantation type of setting, but they would not apply to a smallholder farm setting. And then finally, we are a multi-stakeholder initiative because we work with businesses, which are companies, which can be brands and suppliers, but we also work with universities and civil society organizations. And all of these parties can be part of the FLA, and they all work together to address the most pressing worker rights issues. And then if we go to the next slide. The right to fair compensation and living wage is enshrined in our code of conduct. And what our code of conduct element on compensation says is that every worker has a right to a compensation that allows them to cover their basic needs and also provide some discretionary income for them. This compensation needs to be earned during regular working hours. And when that compensation does not meet this level, the employer, in this case, it's either the company or the supplier that is working with the FLA, is expected to take appropriate actions that seek to progressively realize a level of compensation that meets a living wage standard. So based on this background, we implemented our approach to living wage, and I think we can go to the next slide. So our 5-year strategy actually started more than 5 years ago. In 2018, our member companies started collecting wage data using the initial version of our wage data collection tool. They collected data from 2018 to 2020. And in 2020, we had a fully scalable wage data collection tool, and we also had a visualization dashboard where they could compare and analyze the wage data they collected against wage benchmarks and living wage benchmarks. So with this analysis, they could identify the living wage gap, and member companies were expected to also develop what we call the fair compensation blueprint. And this is essentially an action plan detailing exactly how they're going to progressively close that living wage gap. The FLA asks that member companies take into consideration responsible purchasing practices and engagement with civil society organization as they're drafting their fair compensation blueprint. And in 2021, member companies were also expected to have a public commitment on living wage. And then the last phase of our strategy from 2022 to 2025 is what we call driving progress and reporting. So here, for example, in 2023, we released public reporting guidance so that our companies know how to report on living wage progress. This guidance is actually available on our website for everyone to look at. And then next to that, we also started testing some implementation strategies. For example, we had 2 projects, one living wage pilot in Vietnam and one living wage case study project in Bangladesh, which is ending this year. And both projects were a way for us to test whether multi-pronged strategies where we engage both with factories and brands can lead to a sustained wage improvement in worker wages. I think we can go to the next slide. So now I'm going to focus a little bit on the wage data collection tool. The strategy that I just talked about is really for our members. And the tools that we developed as part of this strategy is also available for non-members as a subscription service. The initial tool that we developed was an Excel-based tool. And since then, we have been working together internally with a task force that we set up that we called the FLA's Fair Compensation Task Force. And we have also engaged with civil society organizations to gather feedback and really aim to continuously improve the tool that we have. And with that feedback, last year we launched a revised tool, which is now fully online. So it's not an Excel-based tool anymore. We will demo it a little bit later, so it will be a lot more tangible for you all. The online tool also has differences in methodologies. So in the previous tool, we were asking factories to provide wage data for 3 pay periods: the pay period with the highest production volume, the average production volume, and the lowest production volume. And then the tool was then computing a monthly average for the calendar year. With the new tool, we are asking factories to provide annual data for the whole calendar year. So there is no more cherry picking that can happen. And the update that we have done was also a way for us to really incorporate a holistic approach to wage data collection to meet human rights due diligence requirements. So what we mean by this is It was, on the one hand, to simplify the tool, but by simplifying it, it also allows us to start collecting data on other elements and strengthen our approach to human rights due diligence. And one element that I can think of, for example, is the gender disaggregated wage data collection, which we will talk more at length about in this webinar. I think we can go to the next slide. So this is a snapshot of the online wage data form, the new tool that was developed and launched last year. I will not spend too many details on this because we have a demo coming up, so you'll have the opportunity to get a little bit more familiar with it, but this is what it looks like. Next slide. And then I also want to go over some of the main methodology updates that we've made. So as I mentioned, now we are really requesting wage data for the full calendar year. So I say calendar year, but it's actually for 12 months, and companies can choose the start date. It will always be for 12 months. But our recommendation is usually that companies collect data for the full calendar year because it's easier to then do year-over-year comparisons. Another change is that we are now not only collecting the factory name, but also collecting factory IDs. So companies, when they're filling out factory data in the system, they can input IDs from the system they're using. So that could be FFC, Open Supply Hub, or any other internal system. But also the factory, once they get access to the platform, they can input the IDs that they know they have with the brands that they work with. We also started collecting the lowest wages at the factory and the bargained wage at the factory if there's a collective bargaining agreement. In the previous tool, we were asking the factory to provide the sum amount that they're paying for in-kind benefits or cash benefits. Now we are specifically asking them to exclude supervisors to make sure that the average wage is not being inflated. And then I think one of the most exciting features of the new tool is that it's fully online. And so a lot of the manual checks that needed to be done are now integrated in the system. So as the factory is filling out the data, they will get warning alerts and rejection alerts for them to review their data if it really falls out of range. And that allows really the reduction of a lot of the manual check-in that was being done, and to also avoid manual entry errors that can happen. And then another exciting feature is that the factory, once the brand accepts wage data from a factory, the factory can simply share that form with any other company that is using the platform, which then helps them not duplicate the work for the brands that they work with. And the communication, the back and forth communication that was happening through email is also reduced because companies can go directly into the dashboard to approve and reject the form and provide any comments on why the form is being rejected directly through the platform. And then finally, instead of having an Excel tool that is being uploaded into the dashboard, once the data is reviewed and accepted in the platform, it goes immediately live for visualization. Go to the next slide. And this is the visualization dashboard, or a snapshot of the visualization dashboard. So once the brand has accepted the wage data and it gets populated into the visualization dashboard, this tool allows the company to compare the factory average or the occupation average with relevant wage benchmarks. Typically, we will have the World Bank poverty line adjusted for each country. We will have minimum wage for each country. For about 32 countries we have now. We also have living wage estimates. We are a member of the Global Living Wage Coalition, so we typically have the Global Living Wage Coalition estimates. We also have union minimum wage demands when they're available. So we have quite a big a master file of benchmarks that we're updating on a yearly basis. And the other thing to mention here is that our wage data collection methodology is fully aligned with the Anchors methodology for estimating prevailing wages. So with that being said, and all of this we will present in more detail after during the demos. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit more about our gender work plan and why we're focusing today on gender disaggregated wage data collection. We can go to the next slide. So before I start, I do want to recognize that in the current climate, discussions around gender can be challenging, particularly for our business partners. And while I acknowledge that we know that in our industry, the majority of workers are women, at least in the apparel textile industry. And so despite the shift in the political environment right now, we know that this topic remains as important as ever, at least in our industry. And so this kind of links to why we set out to do this gender work plan, which was launched in 2024. Well, first and foremost, it's because, as I just said, the majority of workforce in FLA supply chains is women. And then we also have our FLA strategic plan, which was approved by our board in October 2022, where we are very clear that our focus is workers and that we will be prioritizing issues that are of the most fundamental importance to workers. And that includes living wages, but it also includes gender-related violence and discrimination. We want to do this by employing a gender lens, by being intentional about employing this gender lens, and by being able to measure the impact of our program on women workers. The other thing that we started last year is an alignment process with the OECD due diligence guidance for responsible supply chains in the garment and footwear sector. And as part of this alignment process, gender is also something that came out as something that we need to be more intentional about in our principles. And finally, we want to ensure that our standards are continuously updated to reflect the highest international norms, and that our member companies are also prepared for any upcoming standards and regulations. So these are the reasons why we launched the gender work plan. And I think we can go to the next slide. And as I said, the gender work plan is really us being intentional about gender objectives. And with this work plan, we aim to achieve 3 main goals. The first one is research and knowledge building, making sure that we're strengthening FLA's knowledge and expertise on gender issues in our supply chains, that we're also contributing to research, case studies, and pilots to remediate and mitigate gender-based violence and discrimination. We also want to improve our standards and programs. So, for example, through the OECD alignment, we are identifying gaps and addressing them to improve our existing standards, our assessments, our complaints mechanisms. And then finally, we want to be able to measure the impact and to report out on it. And this is really where this webinar is situated. It's about us developing tools that allow us to measure and improve gender inequities in supply chains, and also report progress on gender pay inequity and discrimination. And so gender disaggregated wage data collection is only the first step in measuring impact and understanding how our tools can support the impact measurement and reporting. And so with that being said, I will hand it over to my colleague Steffi, who will talk a little bit more about the importance of collecting gender disaggregated data.
Thank you, Shaima. Hi everyone again. So now you may wonder, out of all of the social compliance issue, why do we should give attention to gender disaggregated data? What we think is that by analyzing this data, we can understand the gender pay dynamics in the supply chain. That is to say, to have a bit more understanding of the workers and at your supplier factories in general. And especially as we've mentioned before many times that most garment factories are made of female workers. And with the data we have in hand, we can address any potential gender pay inequality apart from the living wage gap. Especially when we have been in a factory, it's quite common that the factory management mostly made up of male, and then that's why it's also important to understand how the factory policies are applied equitably across its workforce. And this is really important when we look at potential risk in compensation systems and policy in the workforce with like this setup. Research like the Ankler Research Institute shows that national-wide policies and statistics on gender equity may not always be reflected in the gender dynamics at the factory level. So that's why companies should put in resources and also pay attention and invest in assessing this risk in the supply chain. And now I will pass it on to my colleague Rushu and Carissa to show you the how we use the tool and also how do we operate the visualization site. Over to you, girls. Thanks.
Thanks, Steffi. And
Carissa, I think you are unmuted, so if you can go back and unmute yourself. Yeah.
sorry about that. In this demo, I will act as a factory user to demonstrate the process of filling out the online wage data form in detail. Once the company adds the factory ID to their account, the factory will receive an email from the platform. The factory user will then click on the hyperlink and use the given credentials to access the form. Alongside deploying the online wage form, brands will send over a comprehensive handbook titled FLA Wage Data Online Form Handbook for Factories that provides valuable guidance. Here, the factory will create a wage draft. For instance, they could create a wage draft titled Wage Data 2025, and they will click Create Draft. But for today's demo, we will be using this draft gender data. So we will go here, get draft. Then we are brought to the factory information page. To start, I wanted to note that all the red asterisks here indicate a mandatory field that must be filled out. And I also wanted to note that if you hover over these yellow bubbles, you'll see a description of how the space or the field should be filled out. And these are very helpful. Just give some guidance. All right, so at the top of the form, the name of the factory is already pre-entered by the brand or company. The first section is local information, where you'll select from the drop-downs to fill out the fields. If applicable, you'll see a drop-down for the minimum wage region of the factory. But if you don't see a drop-down area, you can directly type the information in. The next part of the section is selection of occupation. For today's demonstration, since we are focusing on gender data, I wanted to highlight this process. Here, we can start with entering an occupation. For example, here we've entered ironing, and then we followed it with a gender, which here we put female first. For the next space, we would do the same, but do male. And we'll continue this process for the following occupations. For instance, here, we would do floor worker female, and the next one would be floor worker male. For this part of the form, we can add up to 8 occupations. So if we're doing this for gender data, a total of 4 individual occupations can be entered for male and female. After this part is filled, we can click Save and Next. Moving to the next section, we will look at pay information. For the pay period, we are collecting 12 months of wage data. So the start and end date for the pay period will already be selected by the brand or company as it's shown here. Then the factory will fill out the rest of the information accordingly. The total regular days worked per occupation, and, if applicable, bargain regular wage. You can indicate whether the bargain regular wage is earned hourly, daily, weekly, or monthly, and this information will allow the dashboard to calculate accordingly. We also collect the lowest monthly basic wage paid to worker. After you filled in these fields, you will click Save Annual Pay Period, then Check Annual Pay Period, which will allow the dashboard to verify the entries and ensure everything is within parameters. So, for instance, if a factory user fills in 377 days for total regular days worked, let's just show here, and we click Check Annual Pay Period, this will cause an error message to pop up, since the total regular days worked must be between 1 and 366 days for each occupation. So we'll go back to 50 like it was, check annual pay period, and we're all set. So then we'll click Save, and we'll move on to the next section. The next part is worker information excluding supervisors. Here we ask that the pay information entered only be for the production workers. More information is given in a yellow bubble. Since we're looking at gender data today, as you can see, the system requests number of women in occupation and number of men in occupation. Please be sure, for doing gender data, that you enter 0 for the opposite gender, or at least what the name is for the occupation here. So for instance, ironing female, we would do 7 here for the top number of women in occupation, and do 0 for the number of men. And same goes for ironing male, 0 for the top here, and 8 for number of men in occupation. And we would follow the same process for all the occupations we included. Essentially, what you type in here for the occupation would be the automatic number calculated here at the bottom for number of workers in occupation. So once you have this filled out, we'll click Save, move on to the next part. For working hours, we ask that the factory user fill in the total regular hours worked per occupation, as well as the overtime hours worked and the total leave hours paid. Then for the next part, we have payment for regular overtime and leave hours. Here we ask the factory user to fill out the total regular pay, total overtime pay, and total leave pay for all the occupations. This section has a built-in check feature along with the save, and this check feature is built into the dashboard to flag outliers created through unnecessary or out-of-place characters. I will show an example here of misplaced decimal and how the dashboard flags it. So here we just have this, and I'll do save and check. And we have an error message pop up, but if I do it to what it was before, we're all set. And that's just an example of how the check feature works. The next section is incentive pay. In this section, the factory user will use the drop-down to fill out the name of the incentive and fill in the description for the incentive, as well as putting the total incentive pay for all the occupations, as well as if the incentive was earned during overtime. Here we have an example, and I also want to highlight how the edit feature is used. So say the factory has their incentive already put in, but they want to edit it, they will click edit. And this will give them the ability to change anything, to put no. And once they finish editing it, they will go and click add incentive to save it again. And we're all set. For the incentive pay portion, up to 8 incentives can be added. The next part is legal deductions and taxes. Here, the factory user will type in the name of the tax or deduction, provide a short description, and put the total tax and deduction per occupation. They also have the ability to edit the tax or deduction as shown here, and this is similar to the incentive where you can edit, do whatever changes necessary, and be sure to click add deduction to save the changes. All right. Moving to the next section. Here we will be collecting benefit information, including in-kind benefits and cash benefits. At the top, we have a breakdown of the definitions for in-kind and cash benefits, as well as hyperlinks for dictionaries to both. Here we have in-kind benefits. Then we have cash benefits. Yes, that's very helpful. For the in-kind benefits, you will have to select the category it falls under. Then you will fill in the name, provide a short description, and the total amount spent annually for all workers. Here we have an example, and you also have the ability to edit the in-kind benefit once put in. We'll click edit, make any necessary changes, and once you're done, click add in-kind benefit to save those changes. And you also have the ability to delete the benefit if necessary. Then we have cash benefits. For cash benefits, the categories are also broken down. You will also fill in a name, provide a short description, and a total amount spent annually for the cash benefits. You can also edit the benefit here. Click edit. Once you're done editing, click add cash benefit to save it. And for both cash benefits and in-kind benefits, you can add up to 8 each. So once you're done here, we'll click next. Once you fill out all this information, you will have a chance to review it. If you see an error or that something is off, you can click edit. For instance, here, if we were to see something is wrong with the pay information, number of workers, for instance, we could go here, click edit, and it will bring us back to the section of the online form. Here we will be able to make our necessary changes, and we'll go next and be brought to the review page. If the factory wants to keep a record for themselves, they can click Export CSV and save a file offline. At the bottom here, you will see that the dashboard calculates the monthly averages for your review. Here we also see at the bottom the buyers, which is here by default. It's the brand or company who deployed the form, and they will be the recipients of the data. Once you've done a thorough review, you will select Submit Form of Review, and this will go to the buyer or company. In this step,
Thanks, Carissa. I'm gonna share my screen just to continue the process to indicate what's next step after a factory submitted the data. So if you can go to the next slides, you're gonna show up as a visualization once the dashboard user accept the data the factory submitted. And from here, Carissa, if you can take down screen sharing. Thank you. Here's our visualization dashboard. A company user, the dashboard user will be able to see all the countries they have been collecting data from and also the factory in that country. And also if they collect the data year over year, they will be able to select multiple year for the data. So here I'm gonna continue focusing on the data my colleague Carissa just showed you. So before I get into it, I just really want to emphasize everything here are dummy data. That's the testing data we plug in here. It didn't represent any individual factory data. So the factory we know is located in United States, and we choose them here, and we collect the data in 2024. And then on the first page, you will be able to see a net wage ladder. So by net wage, we follow the anchor methodology definition. That is the basic contract wage plus cash benefit plus in-kind benefit minus tax and deductions. So you'll be able to see the net wage ladder here. And if you can verify the incentive pay is earned by all workers in a regular working week, and also the leave pay, which is not already counted as part of the basic wage, you can add the two toggles. And in the wage ladder, we will be able to see the different gender data for different departments next to each other, which give us a better visualization to see the gender gap and also how it looked like compared to the factory average. For the benchmarks here, as my colleague Shema introduced earlier, in our dashboard, we have over 32 countries benchmarks. We have their World Bank poverty line, legal minimum wage, and where applicable union minimum wage demand or their living wage estimates. So once you know that, for example, we know this factory is in Kentucky, and I just need to double check if the benchmark I choose is applicable to Kentucky. So for example, the MIT living wage here is for New York, so I would just reselect it here to make sure that it's comparable for where the factory is located. Moving to the next, if I move to the next function, for all our benchmark information, you'll be able to see the methodology, the calculation note, and also where we got the source for the data point in the dropdown. And the next function here I want to introduce is the benchmark attainment chart. So for benchmark attainment charts, it is for the same country in the same year that the dashboard user is collecting the data. You will be able to see all the factory in that country in that year here to compare them against the single wage benchmark. So for example, here we're looking at Vietnam factory comparison in this account. So you choose the JWC living wage estimate for region 1 net wage and see how all the factory in Vietnam perform against this single benchmark. And that help you identify better the wage gaps here. So 139 is green here, indicating is reaching the living wage estimate. And for the yellow one here, also indicating they fall under 75% to 99%. And for the red one, indicating they're less than 75% of the benchmark. And we also have the incentive pay and leave pay toggle here that you can click to see if that one can help close the wage gap for further analysis. And for all the graph function on the dashboard, you can export that as a PNG file. And we also have similar benchmark selection part that just really to make sure that select the most relevant benchmark that can be applicable to all the wages, all the factory here. And we also have an area for you to see the company's average country net wage, the highest, the lowest, the wage gap between the highest and lowest, and also the average net wage. Different page here. You can go to the detailed wage ladder, which I will show a more detailed data analysis for the gender disaggregated data shortly in our slides. But here I just want to show you the function for the different payment type collected, submitted by the factory. You'll be able to see them here, break them down by regular pay, in-kind benefit, cash benefit, overtime, incentive pay, leave pay, and taxes and deductions. And we are recommending collecting data, gender disaggregated data this way for you to have a better view for the different occupations. So for example, here you might be able to see the average of floor worker is similar to the factory average, but if we break them down by gender, we'll be able to see a gap here. And I will go more detail into that in the slides. Before I get to there, I just want to show one more function on our dashboard is it allow you to select the different payments and export all factories which benchmark gap analysis. So for example, if you want to compare the net wage, so we select regular pay, in-kind benefit, cash benefit, minus tax and deductions, the total pay, and then we select the benchmark we want to compare against, for example, living wage estimate, legal minimum wage, and then the dashboard will calculate the wage benchmarks for all the factories in the account or where you collect data from. And it will allow you to export to a CSV file for further analysis. I will stop sharing here. Carissa, if you can bring back to the data analysis, I will just go deeper into the next slide. Yeah, so here is the same wage ladder you see just now in the website. And I just really want to showcase in this way, collecting data for different departments by gender, it will give you a better view about what contributing to the wage gap. So for the floor workers, here we see there's a larger gap in the regular pay that contributing to the 7% wage gap. And for the ironing department, it looked like ironing male might have more overtime that's contributing to the 11% wage gap. And for the washing male female, it could be fall under incentive pay that lead to the 24% wage gaps. So by the number, we know that on average, there's around 14% wage gap between male and female workers. But in this way, collecting data this way will give you a more straightforward showcase about where the gender pay difference really fall under. So with that, I will hand it back to my colleague, Steffi and Shima. And if you have any question, please put that in the Q&A section, and we will cover that in the right after.
Thank you very much, Rushu and Carissa, for walking through the forms and the site. Now, if companies are interested in doing in collecting gender disaggregated pay data, we have some tips for you. And as a first timer, we understand that some companies would be very excited. They want to collect as much data as possible and to have so that they can have as representative data as possible. But then we advise you to be realistic and to be really precise in doing this exercise, because we know that it is a very it can be a very resource-driven exercise. Say we advise that if you are interested in particular country, you would select a handful of suppliers from that particular countries, or if you are interested in certain types of products, you also do the same. And also make sure that you have sufficient team on site, sufficient manpower on site to guide through the factories in filling out the form and also to review all the wage data. So with an engaged team, it would definitely make your life much easier. And the next step is to really be prepared for the exercise. That means to spend a lot of time training your ground staff and also the factory representatives on how to fill out the form. In our online form, there are parameters set to highlight, specific outliners. That can help us to improve data quality, but then it's also very important to verify the data. So that means like if you can have sufficient resources in training the staff, then they can understand how to fill out the form much better, and you can save a lot of time going back and forth with the factory. And then the next one is to really involve the factory at the very beginning. So having meetings with them, walk them through the steps, and also communicate with like your project objectives and also your goals. So to set their expectation is all. Then they can be, they can expect what the outcome will be. They will not be surprised, or they will not be nervous about how you will use the data, etc. And the next step is that after collecting all the wage data, it's very important to verify them. That's being said is that we make sure that all the data collected actually reflect what's going on in the factory. That means to include all working hours and also the money paid to the workers. That means to make sure the factory there's like no double book keeping, or there's no another attendance system in the factory. So this is very much important, because we need to verify that the data is accurate, so that you can make sure that all this data you get is representative enough. And also to bear in mind that after checking this is all right, we need to spend time looking into the in-kind benefits and cash benefits to make sure that the factories, they have inputted all eligible ones. Because in certain countries, in-kind benefits is very popular, like in Bangladesh, but then it's not the case for cash benefits. It's not at all popular there. Whereas in Vietnam, we see a lot of cash benefits. So it's important to bear this in mind as well. Lastly, be really open with the factory to come and communicate the results with them, and then inform the next steps. In case there's a gender paid inequality found in the factory, be sure that think about the next step, how you're going to deal with that. It can be project or initiatives to working towards like closing the gap, or you can simply start like with enhanced training for the factory management, supervisors, and workers to make them aware of the topic. Now we would like to open the floor for Q&A.
Thanks, Steffi, and thanks everyone. I'm seeing some question coming up, and I was just typing it, so maybe I can address it here. I saw a question saying, are there any other circumstances pay other than 1 day salary for leave day? Yeah, so for the data Carissa showed, that's just a for demoing use, and for in real life, the factory will answer that based on the real circumstances. And I see another question asking how the data will be verified. So in the tool itself, we set parameters just to really prevent any outlier data entered here by any kind of typo the factory have. But the factory should enter the data based on its payroll system, the real data. And during our SCI at FLA, our assessors gonna review the payroll system as part of the assessing process. But when a company is using the wage data tool, we highly recommend them starting that as part of their audit process. And when we are waiting giving more time for people to enter the question, I can quickly go through some questions we have already answered. So at FLA, when Shima talk about companies, that's the business partner we work with in our business caucus. So they can be brands or the parent company that have multiple brands or supplier groups. And I also see some question asking some definition by some key terms we are mentioning during the presentation. You'll be able to find them in the short answers, like leave pay incentive. What do we mean by that? And for different occupations, the online form allow the factory to enter up to 8 occupations. So if you want to collect them by different gender, we recommend to choose the top 4 occupation with the most amount workers. And the online form can still process with as little as 1 occupation if the factory is relatively small and have a simpler production line.
Sorry, Roshu, I would just like to answer some of the questions we are getting in the Q&A, because I just typed in that I would answer them live. We are getting quite some questions on the whether our tool is available to non-FLA members. It is as a subscription service. The subscription depends a little bit on how many factory data sets you want to collect wage data for. I think for costs, there aren't really any requirements, but there are costs related to it. So I think we will be sharing this deck with everybody that participated in this webinar, and we will also provide our email addresses. And if you are interested in subscribing to the tool, we can discuss. We can get on a call with you and discuss the costs in more detail. Also, the new methodology has also an Excel tool and something that is going to come up at the end of this webinar. But the new Excel tool, which mimics the new methodology, is now available also for download to anybody on our website. And we will talk about it at the end of this webinar. There's also a QR code that you can use to access that link directly. And then I think there was a question as well on whether we collaborate on initiatives with brands if a gender pay gap is spotted. So in general, we have been exploring the idea of having a pilot project on gender pay gaps. We are always open to projects, and our projects are not always exclusive to our brands. And so the answer is yes, we can collaborate on initiatives with brands if a gender pay gap is spotted. And we are currently, as I explained earlier in the gender work plan, this is the first step, really starting the gender disaggregated wage data collection. But as we start getting more data in, we will be looking to contribute to more research, pilots, and case studies, and we will be looking for brands as partners in our projects.
I can take the last question before we get to the last slides. I'm cautious about we only have 3 minutes left. So the question is the visualization dashboard accessible only to the respective company? Yes. So the view I just shared, that's the only view that excludes to the user. Nobody else will be able to see your data. Carissa, I think you can go to the next slides and hand it over to you, Steffi.
Thanks, Rushu. So before we say goodbye, we have some very exciting news to share. Today, throughout the webinar, we've been talking a lot about the tool, how will you use it. We are very happy to announce that the offline version of the wage data collection tool has been updated and now is available on the FLA website. You can access the form directly from the QR code there. And also you can search it like with FLA and Wage Tool, you can find it there as well. And apart from today's webinar, in the coming months, we have very exciting events for our members and subscribers of the tool. So in May and June, we will have a Wage Tool refresher, one in the EU-US time zone. The other one will be held in the Asian time zone, where we will show you newly added features and also different translated version of the form. And also in June, we will also launch a user experience survey so that we can have more ideas from the users of the tool so that we can make the tool even better. So I guess that concludes today's webinar, and thanks a lot everyone for joining the webinar, and stay tuned. Not currently, but visit the FLA website, also subscribe to our newsletter for more information. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day. Bye.